Cop calls black woman suspicious, but she's actually a top Secret Service agent. The morning sun glimmered across Washington, D.C.'s bustling streets, casting long shadows on the manicured lawns and stately brownstones. In a quiet side street near DuPont Circle, Asha Caldwell, poised and unassuming, parked her sleek black SUV before unlocking her tablet to review a top-secret briefing. To the passing joggers and dog walkers, she seemed like anyone else running errands. Yet behind her calm exterior lay the emblem of the United States Secret Service, entrusted with presidential security at the highest levels. But in that very moment, an overzealous D.C. police officer spotted Asha and deemed her suspicious. Little did he know he was about to spark a chain of events that would reshape both their lives and the city's conversation on race and policing. Asha Caldwell rarely had time to herself. Officially a special agent with the U.S. Secret Service, she spent most of her days, and often her nights, ensuring the safety of VIPs, foreign dignitaries, visiting heads of state, and, of course, the President of the United States. Her job demanded round-the-clock vigilance, endless discipline, and unwavering dedication. That Tuesday was supposed to be a day off, albeit a short one, after an overnight protective detail at the White House. A wave of relief had washed over her when her supervisor, Special Agent in Charge Martin Keller, insisted she take at least one day to rest before diving into the next assignment. She had completed a grueling, sleep-deprived shift, ensuring security for a White House cultural event that saw ambassadors and VIPs mingling over champagne and polite conversation until well after midnight. Asha had driven back to her condominium in the heart of D.C. in the early hours. By sunrise, she was still too wired on adrenaline to sleep. She decided to make use of the free morning, a run around her neighborhood in Columbia Heights, a quick grocery trip, and a brief stop at a secure supplier to pick up her newly updated ballistic vest. After that, her plan was simply to park somewhere quiet with a coffee, read through the details for her upcoming Chicago mission, and finally let her body wind down from the hyper-alertness that came with White House duty. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood of Cleveland, Asha had witnessed the gap between her own community and the seats of power she now inhabited. She discovered her passion for law enforcement at Howard University, where she majored in criminal justice. Through a combination of scholarships, academic excellence, and an iron will, she earned her place at the James J. Rowley Training Center, the Secret Service's elite facility in Beltsville, Maryland. Her performance there quickly set her apart. She ranked near the top of her class, excelled in marksmanship, and demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to handle high-stress scenarios. In the 6 years since she joined the Secret Service, Asha had served a variety of assignments, investigating financial crimes, assisting with cybersecurity sweeps at major events, and eventually joining the Presidential Protective Division. Each role demanded absolute professionalism, yet the protective detail was perhaps the most challenging and prestigious of them all. The President's life was in her hands, along with a team of equally trained experts. On that Tuesday, though, she wasn't Special Agent Caldwell, at least not officially. She was just Asha, a woman who needed an hour of solitude to review confidential documents on her tablet and gather her thoughts. She chose a quiet street near DuPont Circle, not too far from an artisanal coffee shop she liked. She parked her government-issue SUV between a row of elegant Victorian-era homes. The spot was perfectly legal, and the serenity of the morning was just what she craved. For about 20 minutes, she simply sipped from a thermos of Earl Grey tea and scrolled through an encrypted briefing on the upcoming Chicago security operation. The air smelled of fresh dew and distant pastries from the local bakery. She had no inkling that an officer just a couple of blocks away was eyeing her vehicle with growing suspicion. Officer Travis Langley was on patrol. At 41, he had spent nearly 2 decades with the Metropolitan Police Department, MPD. His father had been an MPD officer, as had his grandfather before him. From a young age, Travis revered the notion of family tradition, patrolling the same streets, wearing the same badge, believing in the same tough-minded approach to law and order. But behind that legacy lay a tangle of inherited biases and unexamined beliefs. Although the MPD provided training on racial equity and constitutional policing, Travis had internalized a simpler creed: gut instinct. He saw the world in terms of potential threats, a perspective that often led him to confront people who didn't look right in certain neighborhoods. And today, Travis was stressed beyond his usual level of wariness. Financial struggles weighed him down. He was behind on mortgage payments for the suburban home he shared with his wife, Erin, and their 2 young children. Erin had suggested they downsize or shift finances, but Travis's pride wouldn't allow him to let go of the image of being a successful provider. He also carried resentment, feeling that the city had changed too fast, that he no longer recognized the old DC his father once knew. As Travis turned onto a quiet street near DuPont Circle, he spotted a black SUV parked in front of a row of expensive properties. From a distance, he could see someone inside, apparently fixated on something in their lap. His mind immediately churned through scenarios: stolen car, someone casing the neighborhood for break-ins, or maybe even a drug deal. When he got close enough to see that the occupant was a young black woman, his suspicion, shaped by years of unchallenged bias, soared. In truth, Travis rarely gave the same scrutiny to middle-aged white men in similar vehicles, but he wouldn't have recognized this double standard as racism. To him, it was common-sense policing. Flipping on his dash cam, Travis circled the block twice, waiting to see if the SUV would move. It didn't. With each pass, his conviction grew. Something was up. Eventually, he parked his squad car a short distance away, scribbled notes into his log, and called in the plate number. The dispatcher confirmed that the SUV wasn't reported stolen. The registration was valid. Everything about it appeared legal, yet that didn't satisfy Travis. In his mind, if she wasn't doing anything wrong, why sit there so long? Why in that particular neighborhood? He rationalized that criminals often looked legit on paper, but were caught by keen-eyed officers who noticed tiny details. "This is definitely worth checking out," he muttered to himself, stepping out of the cruiser. He walked up the sidewalk, ignoring the comfortable hush of the morning that suggested normalcy, and prepared to confront the suspicious driver. Asha was so engrossed in reading about the routes, threat assessments, and local law enforcement cooperation planned for the president's upcoming trip to Chicago that she didn't notice Officer Langley until he rapped sharply on her window. The sudden noise made her jump, only slightly thanks to years of training, but enough to quicken her pulse. Rolling down the window, she found herself face to face with a white officer sporting a stern, vaguely antagonistic expression. The tension in the air was immediate. "Good morning, officer," Asha said calmly. She had faced far more intense situations while undercover or on protective detail, so she hoped courtesy would diffuse any tension. "License and registration," Travis replied, skipping any pleasantries. His voice carried a note of challenge, as though he fully expected a confrontation. Asha's eyes narrowed in confusion. She was sure she hadn't violated any traffic laws. She checked the no parking signs. She was well within legal limits. Nonetheless, the golden rule of law enforcement interplay, especially as a black person, even if you're an agent, was to remain cooperative unless things escalated beyond reason. "Officer, can you please tell me why I'm being stopped?" Asha asked politely, though her posture betrayed a certain wariness. "You're parked here under suspicious circumstances," he shot back. "Folks around here have reported car break-ins and drug activity. I see you sitting here for a while, so I need your license and registration to confirm everything is in order." Asha internally bristled. The phrase "suspicious circumstances" was vague enough to cover an officer's personal bias. Still, she decided to comply, at least for now. She retrieved her wallet from the center console, keeping her movements slow and deliberate, and pulled out her driver's license. Then she opened the glove box to retrieve the vehicle registration, which listed the Secret Service motor pool as the lesser, but had her name included as an authorized user. Handing them over, she maintained eye contact. "Here you go, officer." Travis snatched the documents and turned away without another word, striding back to his cruiser. Asha watched him in the rearview mirror, her heart starting to pound. She had encountered overzealous local cops before, but usually once they ran her name, they'd notice her federal credentials, especially given that the registration belonged to a government fleet. She hoped that once he saw the paperwork, he'd realize there was nothing amiss. Instead, she saw him sitting in his cruiser, talking animatedly on his radio. At intervals, he turned to stare at her SUV, as though trying to match her face to a known suspect's photo. She glanced at the time on her dashboard. She had errands to run, but now she was stuck in an unplanned standoff. Minutes ticked by. Finally, Travis emerged from his cruiser again. He approached the SUV with a renewed sense of authority. Asha detected an almost triumphant glint in his eyes, as though he'd convinced himself he had a real suspect on his hands. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." Her chest tightened. "Officer, what's the probable cause?" He glared. "Suspicious behavior. I see you're from Cleveland. The car is registered under a government fleet with some lease arrangement. That alone is unusual. I have questions, and you're going to answer them." Asha's hand drifted toward the inside pocket of her blazer, where her badge and Secret Service credentials were kept. She paused, though. Protocol advised that if you're not actively on duty and the situation is relatively calm, you didn't have to flash your badge right away. But was this scenario relatively calm? The tension in Travis's voice said otherwise. She exhaled, carefully opening the door. "Fine," she said, stepping out. "Let's keep this professional." What followed would be anything but professional. As soon as Asha stepped out, Travis circled around behind her, gesturing toward the SUV's hood. "Hands on the hood," he ordered. It took every ounce of Asha's composure not to argue. She was more than aware of her rights. One needed reasonable suspicion, beyond a vague "you look suspicious," to conduct a frisk. But as a black woman, she also knew how quickly such stops could turn dangerous if she resisted. She placed her palms on the hood, feeling the warmth of the engine against her skin. Travis patted her down more forcefully than necessary, his hand pressing into her lower back. Asha bit the inside of her cheek to maintain composure. "You carrying any weapons?" he demanded, voice razor-edged. She cleared her throat. "Yes, officer, I'm a licensed carrier under federal law. My sidearm is stored in a locked compartment in the back of this SUV, as per regulations." Travis stiffened. What regulations? She closed her eyes for a moment. He was pushing her. "The Law Enforcement Officers Safety Act, LEOSA," she replied, referencing the law that allows qualified law enforcement officers to carry concealed firearms across jurisdictions. "I'm in full compliance." He made a dismissive sound. "We'll see about that." Then he proceeded to open the passenger side door and rummage through the front seat without asking for permission. Asha stood by the hood, fists clenched, shock and anger warring within her. In the corner of her eye, she noticed a few pedestrians slowing to watch. Their faces held curiosity, concern, or maybe relief that they weren't the ones being stopped. The old adage popped into her head. You can be the most law-abiding citizen, but if someone sees a uniform harassing you, they'll assume you did something wrong. After a couple of minutes, Travis slammed the passenger door shut. "Where's your proof of these federal regulations?" he demanded. By this point, Asha recognized that the situation had escalated far beyond a typical traffic stop. He wasn't going to let her go peacefully unless she established who she really was. Stepping away from the SUV hood, she turned to face him, slowly pulling out her Secret Service credentials. "Officer," she said, her voice calm but tinged with the authority she'd earned through years of service, "I'm Special Agent Asha Caldwell of the United States Secret Service. If you check your system or call in to confirm, you'll see that my credentials and firearm are entirely legal." For an instant, time seemed to freeze. The look on Travis's face swung from confusion to disbelief. Secret Service. He glanced at her badge and ID, scanning the emblem, her photo, and the official seals. Asha expected relief, maybe an apology. Instead, Travis's face hardened in denial. "How do I know this isn't fake?" he spat. "People make all kinds of fake IDs." She bristled, feeling her heart thud in her chest. "You can radio your supervisor. The name on that ID is in the federal database. You can also confirm with the Secret Service Central Office." Travis snatched the credential wallet from her hand, stepping back as though he feared she might attack him. He stared at it, flipping it open and shut, his brow furrowing in frustration. Asha realized he was cornered. He wanted so badly for her to be a fraud that he was ignoring the plain truth in front of him. "All right," he growled. "We'll see if your story checks out." As he turned to walk back to his cruiser and radio for backup, she caught a glimpse of something else on his face. Fear. In that moment, Asha realized this wouldn't be a quick resolution. The situation was about to turn far more complicated, dragging them both down a path where prejudice and power struggles would collide. Travis radioed in for backup. The cryptic nature of his message, something along the lines of "possible suspect with a questionable federal ID," sparked curiosity among nearby units. Within minutes, a second squad car rolled up, lights flashing. Sergeant Elaine Rodriguez stepped out, scanning the scene. A well-dressed black woman standing beside a sleek SUV, and Officer Langley clutching what appeared to be official credentials. The tension in the air was palpable. A few more onlookers gathered at a distance, cell phones raised, some possibly recording. "Langley, what's going on?" Rodriguez asked, her voice carrying the calm authority of a seasoned officer used to defusing chaotic situations. Travis glared at Asha before answering. "I found her parked here, suspicious. Claims she's Secret Service. I need confirmation." Sergeant Rodriguez turned to Asha. "Ma'am, can I see your credentials, please?" Asha extended her hand, open-palmed. "He has them, Sergeant." Rodriguez's gaze flicked to Travis's hand, where he still clutched the badge wallet. She motioned for him to hand it over, which he did reluctantly. Rodriguez studied the credentials carefully, then looked back at Asha. "Special Agent Caldwell, is that correct?" "Yes, Sergeant." Rodriguez's expression shifted to one of professional courtesy. "If you don't mind, we're going to verify this with our dispatch, as well as with the Secret Service. Would you be willing to wait here?" Asha gave a small nod. "That's fine." Travis snorted, crossing his arms. "She might be armed," he said, as if this were the final verdict. Rodriguez shot him a sidelong look. "A lot of off-duty officers and federal agents are armed. You know the city's laws, Langley." Asha took a careful breath. "I informed him I was carrying under the Law Enforcement Officers Safety Act. Everything is legal." Sergeant Rodriguez signaled for a moment of privacy, pulling Travis aside. They spoke in hushed tones, but Asha could read body language well enough to sense that Rodriguez was chastising him for escalating the situation without probable cause. Every so often, Travis gestured angrily in Asha's direction, but Rodriguez's stoic demeanor remained intact. After a few minutes, Rodriguez turned back toward Asha. "Agent Caldwell, we're going to run a verification check. Shouldn't take long. I apologize if this has been inconvenient." Asha nodded, restraining the swirl of emotions tightening her chest. "I appreciate it, Sergeant." She stood by her SUV as the second officer from the newly arrived squad car typed furiously into a laptop. The beep of the radio, the murmur of onlookers, and the hum of city life formed a dissonant backdrop. Eventually, the officer at the laptop looked up, wide-eyed. "It checks out," he called to Rodriguez. "She's active Secret Service. No warrants, no flags, everything's legit." Rodriguez let out a measured sigh. "Understood." She walked over to Asha and handed her credentials back. In a voice that betrayed her regret, she said, "Agent Caldwell, I'm sorry for the trouble. You're free to go." Asha accepted the wallet, but locked eyes with Rodriguez. "Sergeant, I'm filing a formal complaint about this stop. Officer Langley had no valid reason to detain me, and he conducted a search of my vehicle without permission or probable cause." A flicker of discomfort crossed Rodriguez's features. "Understood," she repeated, not offering a defense of Travis's actions. You have every right to do so. Meanwhile, Travis stood a few steps away, fists clenched, face flushed. He radiated resentment, a man who had bet on his suspicions and lost big. As Asha retrieved her license and registration from Rodriguez, a hush fell upon the scene. The onlookers dissipated, some shaking their heads, others whispering. In that quiet moment, Asha climbed into her SUV and closed the door. She fought the impulse to speed away. Her training insisted she remain composed. With one last glance in the rearview mirror, she saw Travis glaring at her, the shape of a man whose world had just been thrown off balance by a painful truth. His suspicion was wrong, and it might cost him dearly. Asha's anger simmered throughout the rest of the day. She had intended to pick up her new vest at a secure facility and maybe stop by her favorite bookstore in Georgetown. Instead, she found herself replaying the incident in her mind, reliving the indignity of being treated like a criminal for doing nothing but sitting in a car. The fact that she had to flash her federal badge to get basic respect gnawed at her conscience. What if she hadn't had it? What if she were just an ordinary citizen? She decided to file a detailed report before her emotions cooled. Using her laptop at home, she composed a thorough account of the incident for MPD's internal affairs. She documented the time, the location, the requests Officer Langley made, and his refusal to accept her credentials until forced. She also sent an official memo to her Secret Service supervisor, Special Agent in Charge Keller, explaining that she had been detained by local law enforcement. Keller responded within minutes. Agent Caldwell, thank you for the prompt notification. We take such matters seriously. I have contacted the MPD Commissioner's office to ensure they're aware this incident happened with one of our agents. Please keep me updated on any developments or requests for further information. That show of support lifted a bit of weight from Asha's shoulders. Still, she knew how departmental politics worked. The MPD might close ranks, or, alternatively, they might see this as a chance to demonstrate a commitment to zero tolerance for racial profiling. The outcome was far from certain. In the MPD precinct, the fallout began almost immediately. After Travis Langley and Sergeant Rodriguez returned to the station, word spread like wildfire among the officers. A local cop nearly arrested a Secret Service agent for looking suspicious. Some found it laughable, others were outraged at Travis's conduct, and a few sympathized with him, complaining that the city forced them to walk on eggshells. Travis himself was called into Captain Jenna Marshall's office for a closed-door meeting. She was a lean, tall woman in her 50s, with a reputation for a no-nonsense approach. Seated behind a metal desk, she glowered at Travis. I just got a call from the commissioner, she said flatly. He's furious. So is the Secret Service. Travis tried to explain. I had reason to believe... Captain Marshall cut him off. Reason to believe what, exactly? That a woman legally parked in a wealthy neighborhood is a criminal because she's black? Travis's cheeks reddened. I didn't say that, he stammered. She was just suspicious. I'm not psychic. I didn't know she was Secret Service. She drummed her fingers on the desk. You didn't have probable cause. You performed an unauthorized search, and then you doubled down on your mistake rather than de-escalate. Anger flared in Travis's eyes, but he recognized the precariousness of his situation. Captain, he said, struggling for composure, I have never had a complaint that stuck. You know my record. Marshall snorted. You've had complaints, yes, just not any that went this far. Look, I don't enjoy this, but we can't ignore that you might have violated her constitutional rights. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. She pointed to the door. Go home. You're on administrative leave pending an internal affairs investigation. I suggest you cooperate fully. Travis stormed out, slamming the door behind him. For the first time in his career, the path ahead looked treacherous. And if the rumors were true, that the Secret Service was livid, this could be the beginning of the end for him. Washington, D.C. has a way of magnifying drama. Whether it's a political scandal on Capitol Hill or a local policing controversy, The city's swirling ecosystem of journalists, activists, and officials often transforms internal matters into public conflagrations. It didn't take long for the story of an MPD officer detaining a Secret Service agent to leak. At first the details were vague. A small local blog mentioned an unnamed officer and an unnamed federal agent in a questionable stop. Then a mid-level city official, perhaps hoping to curry favor with the press, confirmed some specifics. The federal agent was indeed from the Secret Service, and the officer was placed on leave. That single confirmation opened the floodgates. By the end of the week, local news channels and the Washington Post had picked up the story. Reporters called the MPD for comment. The official statement was terse. "We are aware of an incident involving one of our officers and a U.S. Secret Service agent. An internal review is ongoing. No further details at this time." The Secret Service, notoriously tight-lipped, offered a similar line. While they would neither confirm nor deny the agent's identity, their statement emphasized the importance of mutual respect between agencies. The secrecy only fueled speculation. Meanwhile, online, social media lit up with debates. Some users raged that the MPD had racially profiled a woman in a nice SUV. Others insisted that the cop was merely following procedure and was being unfairly punished because he'd stumbled upon a powerful federal agent instead of an average person. The hashtag #USSecretServiceStop popped up on Twitter, with arguments pinging back and forth. Asha watched all of this unfold with a mix of frustration and dismay. She had not sought the spotlight. Her only goal was accountability. But in the internet era, stories spiraled out of control, facts mixed with rumor, and soon her entire situation became a proxy war for heated national conversations on policing and race. At one point, her mother, who still lived in Cleveland, called in a panic. "People are saying on the news that you were arrested," her mother exclaimed. "No, Mom," Asha sighed. "I wasn't arrested, I just got stopped." "They better not put my baby girl in jail," her mother fumed. "You want me to call the city councilman or the mayor? Your father always said—" Asha gently steered the conversation away, reassuring her mother that she was safe and that the Secret Service legal team was handling it. But inside, she felt her own anxiety intensify. The next step, she knew, would be the Internal Affairs inquiry, where she would likely need to testify about Travis's conduct. And she had a strong sense that Travis wouldn't go down without a fight. The MPD's Internal Affairs Division was housed in a grey, unadorned building on the edge of downtown D.C. It embodied the department's less glamorous side, where officers were investigated by their peers and departmental politics often bubbled under the surface. Asha received a formal request to give a statement, although she could have submitted her testimony in writing or even via video conference. She chose to appear in person. She felt it was important to show she wasn't afraid to look them in the eye and speak the truth. She arrived on a Thursday morning, wearing a dark navy blazer and dress pants, her Secret Service badge clipped discreetly to her belt. The waiting area was small, with worn chairs and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Two older men in suits whispered to each other in a corner, occasionally glancing her way. After a few minutes, Lieutenant Rebecca Hughes emerged, a woman in her late 40s with close-cropped hair and a determined set to her jaw. "Agent Caldwell, I'm Lieutenant Hughes, head of Internal Affairs for this district. Thank you for coming." She led Asha down a hallway into a conference room. Inside sat Detective John Chang, Internal Affairs investigator, and an empty chair facing a modest table with a few neatly stacked files. They offered Asha a seat, a bottle of water, and a moment to settle. Lieutenant Hughes began in a neutral tone. "We appreciate your cooperation. We're here to gather a clear picture of what happened during your interaction with Officer Langley. This meeting is recorded and part of an official investigation." Asha nodded. "Understood. What can you tell us about the initial stop?" Hughes prompted. Asha recounted every detail she could remember, from Travis's abrupt knock on her window to his demands for her license and registration, to the pat-down that followed without clear justification, and finally her revelation of her Secret Service credentials. She spoke calmly, aware that any sign of emotional outburst could be misconstrued. Detective Chang listened intently, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Could you describe his tone? Did he mention any reported crimes in the area? Did he read you your rights at any point?" She answered methodically, "No, he did not mention a specific crime. No, he did not read her rights. Yes, his tone was hostile. She emphasized that the location was a legal parking space, that she had no contraband, and that he found no reason to continue the search once she showed her credentials. Yet he persisted. When her statement concluded, Hughes tapped a pen on her notepad. "Thank you for being thorough, Agent Caldwell. We do have Officer Langley's body cam footage. I want to note that your account appears consistent with what's on the video." Asha tried not to show her relief at that validation. "Has he given a statement?" Chang exchanged a glance with Hughes. "He has, but we cannot reveal its full contents. Suffice to say, it conflicts with some crucial points you've made, and also with the footage." Asha nodded, understanding that departmental policy limited how much they could disclose. "I appreciate the update." Hughes leaned forward. "We'll finalize our findings soon. If we have more questions, we'll reach out to you or your supervisors at the Secret Service. We know these situations can create interagency tension, but we aim for an impartial investigation." Standing, Asha shook their hands. "Thank you. I hope that's the case." As she left the building, she felt a cautious optimism. The presence of body cam footage and a direct contradiction in Travis's statements meant the evidence tilted heavily in her favor. Yet she also knew how often officers received minimal punishment for misconduct, particularly when the victim was an ordinary citizen. She wasn't sure if being a federal agent helped or hurt her case in terms of the department's internal politics. Outside, the late morning sun reflected off the glass facades of DC's busy streets, people hurrying by with coffee cups and briefcases. Asha pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, took a breath, and reminded herself that she had done the right thing by speaking up. The day after Asha's internal affairs interview, Travis Langley sat on his porch steps in a modest suburban neighborhood in Maryland, just outside the D.C. line. He was on administrative leave, meaning no patrol shifts, no daily routines, and an uncertain paycheck situation while the investigation ran its course. He stared numbly at the yard his kids usually played in. The mortgage bills loomed large in his mind, as did the fear of losing his pension if he were fired. He had never considered the possibility that his career could crumble so suddenly. The notion that he might soon be jobless or forced into an early resignation gnawed at him. His wife Erin came home from work mid-afternoon, balancing a grocery bag on one hip. Her expression tensed as soon as she saw him. She hadn't said much since learning about the incident, aside from quiet remarks on how they would cope financially. "How did the union meeting go?" she asked, setting the grocery bag on a small outdoor table. He shrugged, expression bleak. "They're waiting to see what internal affairs concludes. They said if it goes to a disciplinary board, they'll provide an attorney, but they're not optimistic." Erin's eyes flashed with frustration. "Travis, what the hell were you thinking? Did you really believe some random person sitting in a parked car was that big a threat?" A mixture of anger and shame coursed through him. "I was following my gut. You know we get calls about break-ins around there all the time." She shook her head. "No, you were profiling someone, and this time you got caught because she's Secret Service. What if she had been anyone else? You realize how bad this looks?" He snapped. "So you're on their side now?" Erin's face softened, but her voice was firm. "I'm on the side of not destroying our lives over a wrong decision. You made a mistake. Maybe it's time to admit that." Travis looked away, staring at the horizon. Pride was a stubborn companion. He told himself that if only Asha had identified herself immediately, or if the city wasn't so politically charged, or if leadership hadn't caved to outside pressure, he wouldn't be in this mess. It was an endless loop of justification that only deepened his resentment. His phone buzzed. A text from a former academy buddy read, "Heard about the Secret Service fiasco. That's rough, man. The brass is out for blood. Let me know if I can help." Travis tossed the phone aside, a bitter taste in his mouth. He recalled the day he graduated from the MPD Academy, the sense of triumph and belonging he felt. Now it all felt like an illusion. Later that night, as the moon cast pale light on the sleeping neighborhood, Travis found himself scouring the internet for job openings, security guard, private investigator, anything that might pay the bills if the worst happened. Anxiety gnawed at him, overshadowed only by his simmering rage. How dare she file a complaint that could ruin me? Yet a small, unspoken voice in his mind whispered, "You ruined yourself." In the weeks that followed, local media outlets kept the story alive by drip-feeding new information. Leaks from anonymous sources within the MPD suggested that body cam footage corroborated Asha's account. A well-known DC news blog posted an article titled "Racial Profiling or Overzealous Policing. MPD Officer Under Fire for Detaining Secret Service Agent." Protests weren't large, but an organized group of local activists began picketing outside MPD headquarters, holding signs that read, "End racial profiling" and "Our streets, our rights." They demanded transparency and accountability, pointing out that if a federal agent could be treated this way, the implications for ordinary residents, particularly black residents, were dire. The tension also attracted national attention. A CNN anchor ran a short segment comparing the incident to other high-profile stops around the country. While the story was overshadowed by larger national news, it still found a dedicated audience concerned with systemic policing issues. Within the Secret Service, opinions varied. Some colleagues privately reached out to Asha, expressing support and shock. Others worried that public scrutiny might damage inter-agency collaboration. A few older agents, quietly set in their ways, grumbled that making a fuss over a traffic stop could draw attention away from the core mission of protection. Asha found it ironic that some who claimed to champion law and order now hesitated when that law and order implicated a local cop. Special agent in charge, Keller reassured her that she'd done everything by the book. "Stay focused on your assignments," he advised. "We'll handle any external pressures. Remember, your performance stands on its own." Despite his support, Asha felt a knot in her stomach whenever she turned on the news or scrolled through social media. She read comments from people calling her a troublemaker or accusing her of pulling the race card to get an officer fired. Others praised her bravery, pointing out that many ordinary civilians wouldn't have had the legal backup or rank to hold an officer accountable. The broader societal conversation cut into her thoughts, stirring up memories from her past. She recalled the subtle racism she experienced at Howard University, where some faculty members doubted she'd succeed in law enforcement. She thought about times she'd been followed around in upscale stores, or how doormen sometimes assumed she was a delivery person rather than a resident in her own building. It all felt connected. This pattern of being deemed an interloper in spaces she rightfully inhabited. One evening, after finishing a White House security briefing for an upcoming cultural event, she slipped away to an empty corridor and called her younger brother in Cleveland. He was a schoolteacher, far from the chaos of DC, and he'd always grounded her. "Hey sis," he greeted her warmly. "Been watching the news. You holding up?" She exhaled slowly. "Trying to. It's more than I bargained for." "You're doing the right thing," he assured her. "If you let them get away with it, you'd regret it. And you're making a statement for the rest of us who can't always fight back." His words struck her hard, filling her with renewed resolve. "Thanks," she whispered. "I appreciate that." Hanging up, Asha wiped away a stray tear. She was tired. exhausted really, but determined. The next stage of this struggle would be the formal hearing, and she intended to see it through. The Internal Affairs hearing was scheduled for a crisp Friday morning at the MPD headquarters. The hearing resembled a quasi-judicial process where a panel of senior officers and departmental representatives reviewed evidence, heard testimonies, and rendered a recommendation on disciplinary action. Asha arrived early, accompanied by a Secret Service legal liaison named Genevieve Murray, a poised attorney who handled inter-agency conflicts. They walked through the sterile corridors, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, until they reached a waiting area outside a closed conference room. Travis was already there, sitting stiffly in a metal chair, flanked by a union rep. He glanced up as Asha entered, and for a moment their eyes locked. Anger and resentment radiated from him. Asha perceived it as an almost tangible force. She offered no greeting, focusing instead on the conversation with Attorney Murray. At precisely 9 a.m., a uniformed administrator opened the conference room door and beckoned them in. The space was set up with a long rectangular table at the front for the panel, 2 senior commanders, an internal affairs detective, and a representative from the Office of Police Complaints. Another table faced them, where Travis and his union rep took seats. A smaller table off to the side awaited Asha and Genevieve. Lieutenant Hughes, overseeing the proceedings, gave an introductory statement. "We are here to examine the complaint filed by Special Agent Asha Caldwell against Officer Travis Langley. The alleged misconduct includes unlawful detention, unauthorized search, and possible racial bias. We will review all evidence, including body cam footage, official reports, and witness statements. Officer Langley, you will have an opportunity to respond. Then we will allow closing remarks from all involved parties." The atmosphere was tense, the kind of tension that pressed on Asha's chest. She forced herself to breathe steadily. The hearing began with the playing of the body cam footage that Travis had presumably hoped would vindicate him, but now threatened to unravel his version of events. The audio crackled. The video displayed Travis knocking on Asha's window, their exchange, the rough pat-down, and the reveal of her Secret Service badge. The panel watched intently, occasionally pausing to note timestamps. A soft murmur rippled through the room when Travis's dismissive tone continued, even after seeing her credentials. When the video ended, the union rep tried to contextualize Travis's behavior, claiming he was conducting a valid field stop and searching for possible stolen property. The panel members questioned how suspicion alone justified the pat-down and rummaging through the SUV. Next, Asha took the stand, so to speak. She recalled the events in painstaking detail, emphasizing her compliance and repeated requests for an explanation of probable cause. She concluded by citing her law enforcement background. "I understand the protocols for lawful stops. I also understand that suspicion must be based on articulable facts, not personal bias. Officer Langley did not provide a single specific reason, other than me sitting in my car, to justify the search." Travis glowered throughout, occasionally whispering to his union rep. Finally, he was asked to make his statement. He repeated his earlier defense. High crime in the area, suspicious posture, potential drug activity. But the panel's questions punched holes in his narrative. They showed local crime maps indicating that particular block near DuPont Circle had average or below average incident rates. They asked why he didn't simply request Asha's cooperation or check the registration in his database before searching the SUV. Travis faltered. His voice grew staccato with anger, and at one point he nearly shouted, "I can't read minds." For all I knew, she could have been forging documents or... One of the senior commanders cut him off. "Officer Langley, that's not how reasonable suspicion works in this department. You must have specific facts or behaviors that indicate criminal activity, not just a hunch." After nearly 2 hours of testimony and cross-examination, Lieutenant Hughes announced a brief recess while the panel deliberated. Asha retreated to the hallway where she sipped water from a paper cup, her stomach churning despite her outward calm. Genevieve Murray quietly assured her that the body cam footage was damning evidence against Travis. When they were called back, the lead panelist, Commander Grace Robinson, read the conclusion. Officer Langley, the evidence overwhelmingly shows that you conducted an unlawful search of a citizen's, indeed a federal agent's, vehicle, and you did so based on insufficient cause. Furthermore, your recorded statements exhibit a clear disregard for the procedural and constitutional standards we uphold. The panel recommends immediate termination of your employment with the Metropolitan Police Department. A hush enveloped the room. Travis's jaw dropped. The union rep placed a restraining hand on his arm before he could lash out. Meanwhile, Asher felt a surge of relief, tempered by the solemn realization that this was the kind of accountability that rarely occurred. Officer Langley, Commander Robinson continued, you have the right to appeal. However, the department will move forward with this recommendation effective immediately. Travis bolted to his feet, voice trembling with fury. This is a witch hunt. You're ruining my career over one mistake. Robinson's gaze hardened. You were entrusted with the power to detain and search citizens under strict guidelines. You failed to meet those guidelines. This hearing is concluded. With that, the hearing was over. Asher gathered her things, stepping aside as Travis stomped past, his face flushed with anger, tears, or both. She sensed no triumph, only a quiet resolution that justice was being served. Genevieve Murray gave Asher a small nod, and together they left the building, stepping into the crisp air of a late autumn day. The hustle of DC traffic seemed oddly distant, as though the city itself paused to acknowledge the weight of the moment. Asher inhaled, letting the tension unravel. The outcome might not repair the emotional toll, but it reaffirmed what she had believed all along. No matter who you are, civilian, agent, or otherwise, you shouldn't be treated like a criminal for simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And for once, the system agreed. News of Travis Langley's firing spread quickly through both the MPD and public circles. The department's press release stated that Officer Langley was found to have violated departmental policy and the constitutional rights of a U.S. Secret Service agent. The statement avoided the term racial profiling, but many read between the lines. Some commentators praised the swift action, citing it as an example of the MPD's commitment to accountability. Others questioned whether the punishment was so severe only because the victim was a high-level federal agent, arguing that many similar complaints from ordinary citizens never reached such a decisive conclusion. Asher's life returned to its busy rhythm, yet the incident lingered in her thoughts. She continued her duties, arranging security checks, coordinating with local police forces around the country for presidential visits, reviewing threat assessments, but now she carried an added weight of perspective. She realized that the uniform or badge an officer wears can be a shield or a weapon, depending on the heart beneath it. In the weeks following, she received quiet thanks from friends and strangers alike. Some emailed her directly at her official Secret Service address, expressing gratitude for her standing up for her rights. One message read, "You spoke out where many of us can't. Thank you." Meanwhile, Travis's life descended into chaos. He appealed the termination, but a subsequent review board upheld the panel's decision. His union rep dropped the case after it became clear that body cam footage and contradictory statements sealed Travis's fate. He sold his suburban house at a loss, moved into a small apartment in Northern Virginia, and struggled to find new employment. Security companies hesitated to hire someone fired for constitutional violations, and private investigation firms typically required a clean record. Bitter and resentful, he occasionally vented on social media, blaming the system and political correctness for his downfall. But the harsh truth gnawed at him. Had he paused to consider the actual facts instead of relying on bias, he might still have a career. Months passed, and the city's focus shifted to other issues: a mayoral race, a budget crisis, a new wave of protest marches. For Asher, the memory of being frisked and doubted still stung. but she found solace in the knowledge that her actions had forced a moment of reckoning within the department. She continued to excel at her job, her name occasionally mentioned in high regard at the Secret Service. In quiet corners of the White House or the James J. Rowley Training Center, other agents, women, people of color, and allies acknowledged the significance of what she had done. One evening, just before she headed out on an overnight shift at the White House, Asha rummaged through her desk drawer in her apartment and found the folded note Travis had sent, his final, desperate apology for what happened. She read it once more. It offered no clear admission of guilt, but it hinted at regret. She wondered if he would ever truly come to terms with his actions, or if he'd be trapped in bitterness forever. She refolded the note and tucked it away. Life had moved on, but the lessons remained. Perhaps in time, Travis would confront the prejudices that shaped his fateful decision. Perhaps not. Asha couldn't control that. She could only keep doing her job, protecting the nation's highest office and exemplifying the ideals of service and integrity she'd always held dear. When she locked her apartment door and stepped into the crisp night air, she felt a sense of renewal. She had stood up not just for herself, but for everyone who might be targeted for simply looking suspicious. In a city where power and prejudice sometimes collided with devastating consequences, a small measure of justice had been served, and that was worth something, and thus a seemingly routine moment, parking on a quiet street, ignited a storm that forever changed two lives. Officer Travis Langley lost the badge he once believed defined him, while Special Agent Asha Caldwell emerged with a deeper understanding of just how fragile justice can be when prejudice intervenes. Their encounter exposed the power imbalance that so often tilts against those deemed out of place, shining a stark light on issues still simmering in communities nationwide. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, share it with others who care about justice and accountability, and subscribe to our channel to stay connected with more powerful tales. Your support amplifies these narratives, helping to spark vital conversations about race, policing, and the responsibilities that come with the power to enforce the law. Together, let's keep pushing for a world where badges serve and protect everyone, no exceptions.